All right, ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcoming onto the podcast, James Kobielus, the Senior Director, a Senior Research Director for Data Management here at TDWI. Jim has been on this podcast many times, so hopefully all of you out there are familiar with him. And if you're not, you have the opportunity, of course, to go back into our catalog and check out many awesome podcasts we've done in the past. But today's conversation, I think, might even be on more of the cutting edge as we look ahead into data management for next generation AI. But before we jump in there, Jim, how are you doing? Where do we find you today?
You find me in my basement home office here in Fairfax County, Virginia, with a snowstorm outside that is actually kind of pleasant.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Well, hopefully it doesn't get much more than interesting as far as intensity level goes for you. But very excited to talk about this with you. I mean, obviously, generative AI and next generation AI is, I think, something that we'll be hearing a lot about this year. And I'll start off by just mentioning, data management continues to evolve to address new use cases in advanced analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And within that, the one thing I did want to ask is specific to what is next generation AI? Can you take us through exactly what that even means?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll be speaking on this same topic next month at our Modern Data Leaders Summit in Las Vegas. So this is a preview of what I'll discuss there. And when I put together that presentation, um, I sought not to focus on generative AI, though it's a big component of my discussion and my discussion now. But it brought it to the phrase next generation or the paradigm of next generation AI, because generative AI is not the only thing that's happening in the AI space, of course. It's become a huge trend and phenomenon in the last year or so. But there's a lot more going on in the artificial intelligence world, and I want to very much bring the audience on this podcast, as well as our audience at the Modern Data Leaders Summit, up to date on those trends. So next generation AI. Well, almost by definition, it's everything that is on the cutting edge now and in the near future that hasn't necessarily made it yet into the enterprise mainstream in terms of adoption, but is well on its way towards that degree of adoption. So when we look at artificial intelligence, AI, it's as a paradigm, as a set of approaches, as a set of technologies. It's been around as longer than you or I have, actually since the 1950s, in various forms, and continues to evolve. And the AI of the year 2024 is extremely different from the AI as it was practiced in the 2000s, in the 1980s, in the 1960s. So at this point in time, next generation AI refers to, first of all, building on what is mainstream AI, which is machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, computer vision. These are core technologies of artificial intelligence as it's been practiced for quite some time. Um, and then looking at how those technologies are evolving and likely to evolve in the near future, but also the new things that have burst forth, like generative AI, that build on all those innovations, but take it another step. So when we look at next generation AI, it's everything that I just laid out. Clearly, a big component of what's next generation now is generative this and generative that. So what is generative? Well, generative, there's really two broad use cases for artificial intelligence. And actually, they've been there from the very start. There's the analytical uses of finding patterns in data sets. And then there's the generative uses of building new content based on the statistical patterns that are found in data sets. In other words, natural language understanding is analytical of a use of AI. It's been there for a long time. And natural language generation on the generative side has been there for a long time. But now we have new approaches for doing these things. Most fundamentally is the whole notion of, well, it's all built on neural networks, machine learning models, statistical models. Um, but what's happened in the last several years is that a new category of these models that broadly are referred to as foundation models have risen up. Things like large language models that are able to find patterns in huge data sets that consist of text, but also video and image and audio and music and so forth, and then generate new data or artifacts conforming to the statistical profiles that are learned algorithmically through statistical models, large language models in these data sets. So generative AI is things like, for language, text to text, enter a text prompt, and, it spits out a long, response, responds to your prompt with maybe by generating an essay or a magazine article or a song lyric or whatever you want. There's also text to image. Enter a text prompt saying, show me an image of a puppy dog sitting in a top hat, and voila, the foundation model that's making this happen is able to do that. Generative AI for like text to voice generation, natural language, there's speech recognition, but also being able to generate speech clips based on various prompts. And the prompts needn't be just text. This thing like multimodal capability is next generation AI. That's taking an input in any modality, text, voice, video, image, you name it, and being able to output content in various modalities, text, image, etc. And that's coming along fast and furious. If we look at, for example, at the recent announcement, like say by Samsung, of the future of their smartphones, they'll have the ability in your smartphone to, and it's not just them, it's coming along lots of places, to circle something in an image and then automatically use that image as a prompt to a back-end foundation model that can send you back a caption or a full description of what exactly that thing is that you've just circled. That's the notion of a multimodal generative application. And that's a big part of what next generation's AI is all about. New capabilities and possibilities for all of us based on these technologies and the evolution of them.
And that's super cool. And I'm very excited for that cutting edge type of material and usage for us, commonplace, in our common lives, whether that be via phone or whatever else. I think that those interactions are going to increase, obviously, and it's going to make our world hopefully a little bit easier too. I mean, that I just can't wait. I was visiting Japan recently, and I think that circling of the image would have gone a very, very long way for my wife and I as we tried to stumble through a foreign country, for instance. But no, this is all very cool. And I think there may be, like the semantics of generative AI versus next generation AI might get a little convoluted for some folks. So you're going to have to pay
Yeah,
attention to, exactly where those words are and what and how they,
terminologies will evolve too to describe these things, just like the technologies. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah.
So in building off of that, Jim, how is the generative revolution pushing the envelope of next generation AI?
Yeah. So when we talk about the envelope of next generation AI, at least I'm referring to the enabling technologies that, make all this magic practical. And so clearly it's data and analytics platforms in the cloud and so forth. What's coming new into our data and analytics environments? The servers, the databases, the machine learning libraries and so forth that are making all these generative applications possible. Well, there's some new things that data management professionals need to be aware of and incorporate into their plans for evolution of their capabilities in order to be able to build and operationalize generative AI. One key thing is something, it's not brand new, but it's fairly new and unfamiliar to a lot of data management professionals, is a new type of data called really, or it sort of straddles the line between data and metadata. It's called a vector embedding. But basically, it's basically vector embeddings are a high dimensionality artifact that's created from source data by running it through a neural network. And that vector embedding is a string of numbers that essentially, in an abstract way, represents, let's say you feed an unstructured data file into a neural network. It produces a vector embedding that represents within that unstructured data, that could be voice or video or whatever, it represents the dimensions, connections, patterns, and structures implicit in that data or in that video clip or whatever. And then the vector embeddings are stored generally within a new type of database fairly new type. It's not brand new, but it's unfamiliar, called a vector database. But also graph databases and document databases also can store and manage vector embeddings. And enabling things like vector search so that when you're building a generative AI application, you can query the vectors in the vector store, whatever, using vector search capabilities so that you can identify affinities or similarities between disparate data. Show me all faces, you write a prompt, show me all faces that, are showing a man with a mustache and a pair of horn rimmed glasses, wearing a top hat, with a feather sticking out of it, and show me and send those back to me from this vast, trove of video or image data you have. Send it all back to me, and then annotate each of those images with a precise description of what's there and where it came from. That's the kind of capability that vector embeddings, vector databases, vector search enable, so that you can then build generative AI applications that can do like that, kind of multimodal, that can do amazing things. They can go in and automatically, for example, annotate and caption huge amounts of media fairly quickly without a human being having to type all those labels in there and describe that. The algorithms can do it for us increasingly.
Mm,
This is a way of, as for data management, of getting our arms around unstructured and semi-structured data in an automated way that wasn't really possible, practical, before the era of foundation models, large language models, generative AI got going in earnest. And really, it's only been several years since the enabling technologies, such as transformer models and multi-attention capabilities within large language models, became practical.
mhm,
So, in terms of, pushing the envelope of next generation AI, it's the vector revolution. It's also multimodal data fabrics. In other words, um, data infrastructures, data storage and processing infrastructures that are set up and optimized to handle diverse data types, formats, and sources, especially unstructured, not just structured and unstructured text, but also video, voice, image, music, and so forth. So multimodal data fabrics are another key enabler that's for generative AI, and that need to be worked into your data management architecture and strategy. And another way in which Gen AI is pushing the envelope here on the data management side is that data products are increasingly being built and sold. Things like data-derived analytic dashboards, AI chatbots that are built automatically and are embedded or can be sold and embedded through APIs into disparate products and things like that. What we're seeing is that the generative AI revolution basically, there's a new development paradigm that involves something called prompt engineering. And prompt engineering is, typing in text strings and so forth, and using that then to basically as a way of defining the functional specifications of what it is that you want the backend generative AI fabric to build for you. And then voila, it's these things are built for you automatically based on, your specifications, based on the back end foundation models being able to find statistical patterns that are of within its database of data in the past that conforms, or machine learning models or so forth, artifacts that conform to what it is you're trying to do, and then automatically produce all those new data products for you. So in other words, data product managers, these are tools, generative AI, that are being used as design and engineering tools, and tools for creative professionals to build music and video and so forth automatically in a way that wasn't practical before. So in other words, data products of the future will not be like data products of the past. They'll be built by data product teams that'll be using this technology under the covers as a way of prototyping and bringing products to varying degrees of refinements into being, and to quality assessment and so forth on these things. So many ways, the practice of data management continues to evolve through the incorporation of vector technology, multimodal technology, but also things like prompt engineering as an enabler for your data management fabric to serve as the essentially the assembly line for a new generation of data products that are milled by machine learning algorithms.
Wow, that is so cool and so interesting to hear. And Jim, as you were explaining, something popped into my head. It's like a kind of like a real world example, maybe, of what you're talking about. And maybe I'm off base here, but uh, in when we log into any of these systems that we use on a regular basis, call it Gmail or anything else that you need to log in access to, and then they always try to quiz you with like, are you a robot, right? And a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
times those pictures will pop up and they'll say,
captcha.
yeah, click all the bicycles that are in these series of photos. I feel like
Yes.
that might now be an outdated practice based on what you're saying, potentially, at least in the near future, if not already, right?
I think you're right. I know you're right, in fact, and it's CAPTCHA technology is what you're describing.
Uh-huh.
It's an artifact of the past when we didn't have such super smart bots that can learn quickly from visual patterns and then produce responses at least as intelligent as a human being would be
Hmm.
using their eyeballs and their brain. So how are we going, as part of multi-factor authentication, what are then the multi-factor technologies of the future that'll be resistant to these kinds of attacks, these kind
Hmm.
of attacks? This is not intended, my talk in Las Vegas is not intended to be a cybersecurity discussion, but clearly there's a lot of things that the coming of Gen AI there's a lot of risks. There's
Yeah.
deep fakes, clearly. Deep fakes are well understood. But also being able to impersonate somebody's voice from
Hmm.
almost like 5-second clip of James Kobielus or Andrew Miller's voice or whatever. Increasingly the technology can then produce lifelike audio samples that
Hmm.
sound even to our loved ones exactly like us. In other words, there is the potential for fraud and impersonation attacks, so forth. Clearly, that's the media has focused on those risks. And those
Hmm.
are real risks, but these solutions to these or to address these risks clearly will leverage the same technologies that the hack attackers and the cyber fiends are employing as well. So it's almost like a spy versus spy kind of a competition, see who
Yeah.
comes on top. And I don't have a solution for that, but clearly
Yeah,
those are,
yeah. It's going
yeah.
to be an arms race for sure, but thank you for indulging me in that small tangent there. But let's get
Oh
back to
yeah,
the data
important.
management side of things here.
Yeah.
So what changes will enterprises then need to make in their data lakes, data pipelines, and other infrastructure in order to succeed with this next generation AI?
Right. Well, data lakes. So data lakes are historically a repository for unstructured and semi-structured data that's used in the enterprise, and that still remains their core focus. But now what we're seeing is that data lakes, as part of a broader infrastructure that many call data lake houses to support both business intelligence as well as machine learning, will need to evolve to support multimodal data sources, for example, data, text plus video and image and so forth, to be stored in multimodal data lakes and processed therein. But also vector databases need to come into the overall data architecture in a major way because vector embeddings are critical to all of these applications, vector storage, vectorization of the data itself, vector storage, vector query and search, and the like. That is a capability, the vector database that needs to come into the core of the enterprise architecture alongside data lakes in the overall end-to-end pipeline. In the pipeline itself for generative AI and all next generation AI, is in many ways it's data engineering, sometimes called data ops. It's traditional, machine learning operationalization, ML ops. It's DevOps, it's continuous integration and continuous deployment of code builds and so forth. But also, all of these, let's call them XOps pipelines that run in parallel and are closely linked to each other, need to evolve to support what some call, FM ops, from foundation model ops, or LLM ops for large language model ops, essentially so that they can serve as the infrastructure for orchestrating the complex interactions involved in sourcing the data, vectorizing the data, modeling, AI applications, in machine learning and training them and so forth and so on. But also for handling the growing number of, let's say, large language model applications, LLM applications that use multiple LLMs within an orchestrated capability. For example, for multimodal applications where some foundation models will be used for the robotics components of some applications. Other large language models will be used for the like text-to-text generation capabilities. Yet other foundation models will be used in any given application and project for like like multimodal text to video kind of interactions. So next generation products like self-driving vehicles and so forth will draw on a wide range of foundation models suited to the different subsystems of those products. And then the development of all of those components has to happen in parallel within pipelines that are becoming extraordinarily complex, need a huge amount of bandwidth and storage and processing power, GPUs and the like. It's distributed across complex multi-node cloud infrastructure. A lot of these changes need to happen, these evolutions in your underlying data and analytics architecture to make next generation AI a reality, multimodal AI that combines all these modalities, that drives a huge number of new products, is embedded in products of all sorts going forward, both in industrial, government, business, military, and so forth. So these pipelines need to come together. You need a huge amount of processing and storage and so forth, parallel processing, but also you need governance of all of these, data and models and code builds. And the new governance capabilities need to be built into your environment to do things like to mitigate hallucinations, statistical misperceptions or mispredictions within your that are performed by your LLM. So your governance environment will need to have new roles and workflows and capabilities to control the risk of hallucinations by these models, to ensure that these models don't output like toxic, offensive content, to ensure that the outputs from these new, generative AI and other AI models, that they're transparent, and transparent from the point of view of being able to comply with a growing range of laws and regulations related to the need to keep a detailed audit trail of the entire end-to-end assembly, modeling and training and deployment of these models. Because jurisdictions all over the world have new laws saying that the AI needs to be entirely transparent. So it's always clear where the focus of responsibility is for anything that, if lives are lost or people are hurt from, the actions of an AI product or capability or component, there needs to be some legal recourse by the harmed parties. So all of this governance needs to be baked into this pipeline or this process of this new world of next generation AI. And so the governance capabilities like data governance need to evolve to support these new requirements to address new stakeholders, privacy, anti-bias, and so forth. So there's a lot of evolution that needs to happen on the governance side to operationalize all these next generation AI capabilities. And all of these things I'm describing are happening the world over. These are ongoing trends that we see at TDWI that are taking place on many fronts to really, in many ways, to provide the guardrails to keep these next generation AI applications from overstepping the bounds of what we'd like them to do, what we intend them to do, what we design them to do, And also to make sure to protect human beings and society from them running amok. So there you go.
So then, Jim, what new standards or frameworks, methodologies um, in data management will be needed to unlock the potential of this generative AI in the enterprise?
Wow, that's $1 million question. I could answer for that. Because next generation AI is so many different technologies, so many applications, so many moving parts, so many different stakeholders, so many different players in terms of getting these things built, deployed, managed, and so forth. There are dozens of industry initiatives all over the world defining have defined or are defining frameworks, things like data ethics, data transparency, data privacy, of course, data sustainability, all those things. All of those initiatives are critically important. Um, I don't think there can be any overarching framework or standard or methodology to address all the disparate uses of AI in our lives going forward. It's becoming embedded in everything we do. And that's what like government, legislators and all over the world policymakers, like the US government right now has over 100, like I know the House of Representatives has over 100 pieces of legislation that they're considering to regulate AI. And believe it or not, I'm such a glutton for punishment. I tried to read several of them, and they're all well intentioned, but they're all only coming at pieces of the problem. And quite frankly, I don't know that legislation alone is enough because the state of the art in all these areas continues to defy the ability, not just of intelligent politicians and so forth, but people who do this stuff for a living have a hard time getting their heads around everything that's going on or all the things that might, go wrong or um, or just not go as we would like in terms of the role that these technologies will play in everything, including, of course, like AI as an enabler for a new generation of smart weapons and drones and things. So, a unified way for the humanity to approach AI and all of its guises is essential. But I'm not going to hold my breath that there's going to be any consensus on how to control this stuff at anytime in our lives. I think that the cat's out of the bag. It's not like it's out of control, but it's one of those things where we're just going to have to iteratively crawl our way as a race, as a species on this planet, deploying these new capabilities to figure out various and sundry ways how we can rein this stuff in to do our bidding to make our lives better. Um, so like I said, I wish I had a single magic formula for or standard or framework to propose in this regard. But only to point out something in closing here, which is that artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. And not only have we lived with it, but it's been an enabler, a huge enabler for innovation and economic growth and expansion, and will continue to boost the wealth of the human race with new capabilities that were unimaginable even 10 or 20 years ago. So I'm really, I think AI is on the side of the angels. That's really my final take on it. But you know what? There's many types of angels. And so we have to make sure that no, the ones that have wings, those wings are clipped when they need to be clipped, so they'll stay
Uh,
within their domain. So that's the metaphor upon which I end this podcast.
I love that, Jim. And yeah, I think you're right. There's going to be so much interesting developments on both sides, the positive and possibly the negative sides and use cases as you've outlined. But let's all
Yeah.
hope that we can rein this in so that there's no Terminator scenarios down the line. Obviously, we want to avoid those. But Jim, it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah,
Before you go, I just want to mention to everyone once again that Jim will be speaking as the keynote speaker in our TDWI Modern Data Leaders Summit this in Las Vegas this February 19th. I will put the description of the event in the podcast episode here as well, so people can have an easy link to that. But I would encourage all of you to go ahead and take a look at that and sign up. We have not only Jim, but a whole litany of fantastic speakers that'll be there, and we also do have that with our main conference as well, Transform 2024. So please go ahead and check out our website or click the link below to find out more information about that. But Jim, thank you so much for taking
sure.
us through this very interesting and rapidly changing world of data management. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Oh, here, and everybody have a good day. Bye.